You think about the generations, right? Every generation has new art. Every generation has new music. Every generation has new fashion. And it's only recently when we started thinking about food in that same context, right?
I think before we get started, we're going to look at a brief video explaining some of Corey's wonderful new book, Benu, which is the name of his restaurant. So why don't we look at that for a few minutes, and then we'll begin to talk to each other.
When someone asks me what kind of restaurant Benu is, my first answer is it's an American restaurant. It's open to the influence of all different kinds of cultures. The book is about a menu at Benu, and hopefully we can convey the experience of dining at Benu. Food is identity. It's the most revealing thing about you, about a culture, where you come from, how you live, what's important to you. They go hand in hand. It's really about finding yourself in your work and understanding that there's meaning in finding yourself in your work.
Oh, that was brief. It is a beautiful book and gives me a good reason to try to get to San Francisco. I have not had the pleasure, though I think I have enjoyed just about all of Thomas's restaurants, beginning with Raquel.
Long time ago.
And Checkers, as I remember. Yeah, I was
Good
at
memory.
Checkers. Yeah, incognito. Right. You didn't know.
Oh.
I think what everyone is looking for, or people who are interested in food and reading about it, is a convenient label to put on what is a relatively new form of cooking, which might be considered intellectual, inventive. Is it contemporary? Is it modern? Is it fusion? Is it molecular? How do you describe what you do, your category of restaurant? And we can ask Corey first.
Yeah, I don't really have an easy answer for that. And in an attempt to answer it, I wrote a book. But it's true. It's hard to come up with labels because what something means to me is something differently for someone else. I mean, American cuisine, new American cuisine, what that means to you is different from what it means to chef. So I think that there are restaurants that have to do with classical cooking of an area, like Southern food or classical French food.
Which you are not.
Which we're not. And then there are restaurants that you go to experience the cooking of a particular person or a particular restaurant. And I think that's the camp that we're in.
Thomas? I'm thinking now in terms of French Laundry and per se, not Bouchon or... No,
I understand. It's a good question. I think maybe some of you have heard me chat about this before. I think that you think about the generations, right? Every generation has new art. Every generation has new music. Every generation has new fashion. And it's only recently when we started thinking about food in that same context, right? Nouvelle cuisine, for example, was a generation of chefs at that time who changed the way we thought about food and the way we presented food, certainly the way we cooked food, and certainly the way we thought about chefs. Today, each generation having a take on the traditional food that they were taught as nouvelle cuisine, even though we don't call it nouvelle cuisine anymore. But with that said, we look about cuisine today, and I think about almost in two camps. We have, you mentioned, intellectual food, right? I can go there. Personality cuisine, the chef's personality coming through using techniques from around the world. Corey does this, extremely well. We do this at the French Laundry a little bit. Ferran is intellectual food. It's food that when you taste it, you have to think about it a little bit. It's not just, well, I think this is really good. You have to taste, You have to taste the food and go, the question is not, is it good? The question is, do I like it or not? Because you don't really have any reference points. So that could be personality, intellectual food. More intellectual food than personality food. And then you have on the other side, which I think, is important for me, and certainly in what we try to achieve, is an emotional connection to food, right? Where you taste, a beautiful puree of potatoes, and you go, my goodness, that's amazing. That's just a beautiful, gorgeous flavor, texture, and it is. I've had puree potatoes before, but this is now my new benchmark.
But there is a similarity in presentation in the minds of the public, I think, when they are going to new, contemporary, partly the style of plating, partly that they will get little highly designed bits and pieces of things with dots of color. That is a kind of restaurant in the mind of the public. Aside from whether it is definitely Asian-based as Benu is, you can't read the pages without seeing Asian ingredients. Yours is less ethnically focused, even if your background is a French perception. How would you classify that kind of restaurant as compared to a meat and potatoes restaurant where the food is just on a plate? I think of it myself, and I don't know if this is valid to you, in terms of what became known between World War I and World War II as in architecture and design as the Bauhaus style, which eventually came to be called the international style, which means nothing was based on what happened in Vienna because it was Viennese. Nothing that happened in France with Corbusier was French. Nothing that happened with Mies here was anything but the international style, which was a way of looking at architecture. Is there now a way of looking at food, such as we're talking about, that transcends borders and that all of you chefs around the world are in touch with each other, more or less, on starting points?
Corey?
Well, I think there's definitely some homogeneity in how food looks in certain restaurants. So I know what you're talking about, but that's always been the case. I feel like there have been trends in the way food gets plated and how it's presented, whether it's ring molds and very vertical 20 years ago to things being more spread out and landscapey maybe 10 years ago.
That was only California that piled up food. They didn't do any kind of cooking. They just grilled everything and piled it on top of each other without any exchange in flavor.
I'd have to disagree with that. I think that was Alfred Portali.
What?
Alfred Portali. who was the king
Jonathan
of
Waxman came here with a lot of stacked up grilled food, and he has gone much farther now, I'm happy to say.
Yeah, but you do see people, whether they're being influenced or they're borrowing from each other, you do see that a lot. And because the world is a lot smaller now, and chefs are interacting much more than before, it's something natural that they'll start to influence each other.
No. How do you start to create a dish? What gives you an inspiration for a new dish? Look at ingredients, something you ate in a foreign country or in another place, or what?
I think that's influence. I think you're influenced by what you see, and I think people mistake influence for inspiration. I think inspiration only happens occasionally, and I think if you're lucky, you can really, if you're lucky and aware of the world around you, then you can truly be inspired by something. I can't tell you what's going to inspire me tomorrow. It could be anything. I think that, again, the first thing that we must pay attention to is what's going on around us, that awareness. Wherever you are. A leaf falling from a tree can inspire a poem, can inspire a song, can inspire a painting, can inspire a dish. It depends on how you interpret it. So I think that if you are truly aware and you become inspired, then you interpret it as something that's meaningful for you. And then, of course, then the last thing that follows is evolution. How does that dish evolve into something? Walking down the aisle of a grocery store and seeing a purple box that said, pearl tapioca, inspired the oysters and pearls. Because I thought, well, where do pearls come from? So it was really about that kind of inspiration, or looking at an ice cream cone differently, for the first time, and being inspired by that. but it's hard. It really, we use that term so loosely today. You know, what inspires you? I think it's more what influences you is a better word to use. Yeah.
And you?
Well, there are moments of true inspiration.
Yeah, great.
And for me, I think it's in some ways tied to your goals. I try to look for things that are new for me, exciting, and offering someone an experience they can only have at a restaurant. And so inspiration is tied to those goals as a chef. So sometimes you'll be influenced by things like Chef was saying, but you want to be inspired in a way that'll help you create something that is a goal of yours.
Do you think Nouvelle Cuisine broke the rules in a way that eventually led to what everybody's doing now, when they said all bets are off and began using things from far away?
Well, the term Nouvelle
You're
Cuisine.
pretty young to have been influenced.
Yeah.
Is that why you were looking at me?
That's why. I could look at myself. Really go.
Corey's an historian as well, so he understands this.
No, but Nouvelle Cuisine is such a Eurocentric way to view food. And even though I studied it or read about it immensely or worked in kitchens that were born of it, I've never had an emotional connection to Nouvelle Cuisine. I just have no connection to that. So to always consider the food that I'm cooking through that lens, there's no connection there.
I agree. I think what Nouvelle Cuisine really did for us was kind of release the chefs. Gave us an opportunity to get out of the kitchen, gave us recognition.
By the French gave you permission.
Well, Paul Bocuse, Chappelle, all those guys who finally got out of the kitchen and became well-known chefs. I think the biggest thing that they did for us was give us plated food. Right? Up until that point, everything that was in a three-star restaurant was plated by somebody in the dining room, and those chefs said, we want to take back that, and we want to be able to plate food in the way we see the food being plated. And so, it's something I think a lot of people don't realize is that happened in the late '60s, when food in three-star restaurants and two-star restaurants went from being plated by a dining room person to being plated by the chefs. And so that's something that
But the fact that the French broke the rules was probably most important.
Well, it was their rules to break.
Everybody followed their rules.
At that time, what did you have? In Western cuisine, French food was the most renowned, the most refined.
Yeah.
Right? They're the ones that made the rules.
What does it mean to be an American chef as compared to a chef in any other country? Does it have a special meaning other than being a chef in America? Do you blend more influences? Is it a melting pot?
I think it gives us a lot more opportunity because we're not tied to any ethnic or cultural cuisine like the French are, or even the Japanese or the Spaniards or the Italians. I think we can glean anything we want from around the world and can be considered American because we are that melting pot of cultures. So being an American chef allows us to use a lot of different techniques, a lot of different flavors without being criticized for it too much.
No, absolutely. There's no unifying identity in American cuisine. There's some regional cuisines like the Southern cuisine or things in New England, but it ultimately gives us liberty as chefs.
And are you in touch with chefs in other parts of the world on methods and ideas? Do you talk to Red Zeppi or talk to, Audrey, I'm sure you all talk to, but Otto Lengi, or who's very influential in England right now, though I don't know if the presentation is...
I talk to chefs from around the world all the time. But rarely do we sit around and how do you make that sauce, or what did you put in this emulsion. It's rarely about technique. It's about how we operate our restaurants, what keeps us going, what we find inspiration in, things of that nature.
On the subject of critics, are you at all apprehensive about critics taking into account what has now become a kind of messianic, moralistic tone about ethics related to sustainability, locavore, no GMO foods, organic. And have you ever seen a critic berate a restaurant for any of those lapses?
Yeah.
Why do you call them lapses?
Well, you serve Maine lobster, so there's a lapse. And I'm with you.
Tell me, explain how that's a lapse.
It's not local.
What's local?
Local is as close as you can get to home. And let me say,
Well, I
I'm
mean,
not a local
then
boy.
for me, the Maine lobster is as close as I can get to home for Maine lobster.
Well,
So I'm buying local food. I mean, there's no definition for local. I'm sorry. I mean, is it a
Well,
horse carriage ride? Is it a car drive? Is it how far you can walk in 8 hours? I have no idea what local
I'm
is.
trying to find out in our markets, is it better if I buy peaches from New Jersey than Pennsylvania?
Well, here's a question for you.
Because Pennsylvania's farther away than
Well, I mean, so let's define local as 25 miles, even though that's an absurd radius. And let's say within that 25 mile, there's a farmer who grows carrots. He doesn't really care how he grows carrots. He grows the worst carrots in the world, right? There's a guy who actually now 26 miles away who really cares about the carrots, cares about the soil, really spends a lot of time with his carrots and grows the best carrots in the world. I can't buy that guy's carrots because he's outside of that
I'm not a local.
No, I know.
I buy peaches.
I'm just asking the
from
question.
Georgia. I buy mail order Georgia Freestone.
I think
and white grapefruit from the Indian River.
we have better peaches in California, but we won't go there.
Not as good as Georgia Freestone.
I know it's
I'm
that
a
subject.
vegetable.
That gets my blood boiling when we start talking about
And
local and
sustainability.
sustainability and you know.
Endangered species. You don't serve shark's fins either.
No, I don't.
Tell us
That's
now.
ask Corey. I mean, it's
Well, I think endangered species is a completely different subject.
Yeah.
Criteria.
I don't think any of us are serving endangered species.
But have you ever seen a critic criticized for that? I have yet to see a critic who says they're serving veal and it's raised cruelly or...
Well, I mean, a critic that's a well-known critic, because everybody's a critic today. I mean, you
No, I
go
mean
on,
professional.
you go on social media and everybody's
No,
complaining.
you know that's not
Yeah,
what I mean.
okay.
I mean the kind that can hurt.
Because there are people who really complain about, who have these ideas about local, who have these ideas about sustainability, who have these ideas about carbon footprint. And yeah, they'll complain about. There are guests in the restaurant who will come in and say, why do you buy lobsters from Maine? As you pointed out.
Of course, they're the best.
Right. So it takes a while to explain why, but I think when they leave, they at least understand my point of view. Whether they agree with it or not, I'm not sure.
You said when you and I were speaking before that things have changed so much in the last 5 to 10 years that you would answer a lot of these questions, would have answered them very differently 10 years ago. Can you tell us how?
Well, I think there's just a much more captive audience now.
A much more captive
A
audience?
much more captive audience.
Meaning
I think more
what?
people are interested in food and restaurants than ever before.
But that's not captive.
Well, they're captive as well. There's a greater audience, and there's also a captive audience. I also think that chefs have a greater and larger platform to voice their ideas, what they're doing, what they're trying to achieve in restaurants. And that's changed the dynamic of restaurants and the relationship between the consumer and restaurants.
What has changed since you opened Raquel on Varick and...
I mean, there's so much that's changed since then. It's kind of hard to go down the history of that. That was 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. So I think certainly American chefs have become in their own right credible in what we do. That was the beginning. I am fortunate or unfortunate, depending on how you look at it, to be of the generation of the first American chefs that have gained recognition. Alfred Portali, Jonathan Waxman, as you pointed out, Larry Forgione. I mean, these are all chefs that come from my generation. So we were in that forefront where we were learning as we go, because there was nobody who really showed us a path to success. And it's been a extraordinary, for me, an extraordinary personal experience, because I've kind of watched what's happened with our profession in the past 35 years, which is grow up. And I'm really, really proud of what we have achieved in these 35 or 40 years. And you think about American cuisine and the recognition of American cuisine, you're talking about maybe the early 70s, you know.
Andre Soltner said to me once that one of the greatest things Paul Bocuse accomplished is taking chefs out of the servant class and making them stars. Did that help pave the way for the acceptance of American chefs? Because in the beginning, I can remember a number of lawyers who gave up law to become chefs. I think Barry Wine was
one. Who was the other one?
Oh, there was one, David.
Barry Wine, certainly.
Who had, who?
Barry Wine, certainly, yeah.
Barry Wine, but also there was another one, David somebody, who had a place called Bourguignon or something.
I know 3 lawyers who gave up their practice to found California Pizza Kitchen, right?
But do you think Bocuse did that?
Of course, yeah. I don't think there's any argument about his influence on cuisine and cooking.
But
his
perception
influence
of
on restaurants, no doubt. I mean, before Paul Bocuse, you try to think of great chefs. I mean, you have to go all the way back to Escoffier almost. I mean, you had Ferdinand Point. You had Ferdinand Point in there in between. You know, but the disciples of Ferdinand Point were all the chefs that we speak about today who established Nouvelle Cuisine. You know, Bocuse, Chappelle, that whole band of brothers out of France.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you ask my mother, I mean, 5 years ago, I'm still in domestic help, you know.
Right.
But so
in Korea, it's domestic help, right?
Right. I mean, I'm joking about that, but my point is, I think again, you know, it's.
You're not an executive.
No, it depends what perspective you have, and we're talking a lot about the French perspective, but we're Americans, and I really don't share that perspective at all. And whether it's Paul Bocuse, who's helped, you know, raise the level of French chefs, I think we as American chefs have a very different history. And you know, it's not this linear path for American chefs as it might be in France.
Mm-hmm.
Not now.
Yeah.
And what do you think of tasting menus, which have been excoriated by? Tell us why you like them and why we should like them.
Corey, you want to answer that? You still do a tasting menu, don't you?
We only do tasting menu.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, you know, I think it was the French Laundry that was the first.
Excuse me, is it another name for table d'hôte?
Not at all.
No.
No, not at all.
So,
okay, then.
Well, I think the French Laundry was the first restaurant that I heard of in America doing these very elaborate, long tasting menus, and one of the first to only offer a tasting menu, right? So, and I grew up in that system. So for me, that's become synonymous with an opportunity to connect with a diner and offer the best possible experience that evening for the diner. The diner doesn't know what the best product that came in that particular day was, but we do, and we have the opportunity to offer that to the diner. And
to show what you can do and what you think, it would take a tasting menu?
Well, that's why they come to our restaurants, right? Because they want to experience what we think.
Okay.
And we can offer that in the best way possible through a tasting menu. By taking the choice out, we eliminate the risk of someone choosing unwisely, so to speak.
How could you choose unwisely in a great restaurant?
I think it's possible in terms of sequence, in terms of balance. I think it's very possible. I mean, I've been to a la carte restaurants where you order poorly because it's not what you expected in terms of size, portion, combination, how it marries with your beverage choices. I mean, there are endless ways that you can make bad decisions when you're dining.
You have no idea.
It's true. It's so true. The first decision you have to make when dining is choosing the people that you're dining with. That's the first important decision.
Who should not go to your restaurants? Many years ago, when I worked for about 5 years for the famous Joe Baum, when he was creating the Four Seasons and all kinds of restaurants with themes, he used to say, people don't come to our restaurants because they're hungry. Do people go to your restaurants because they're hungry? And who would you rather see not come to your restaurant other than a deadbeat?
A food critic?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's make news. I couldn't be happier.
Just kidding.
Well, Oh, I think everyone should.
I mean, the kind of
I think,
Yes, but you wrote in your.
I have a democratic point of view. It's like,
But do you see someone who's really sort of uncomfortable, unhappy, not knowing what to have expected, and.
I think that's where the tasting, we talk about the tasting menu. I think there's a lot of different. This is a long conversation, so trying to encapsulate it in these little responses is very, very difficult. But think about the tasting menu. A big part of the tasting menu for me was the law of diminishing return, which means the more you have one dish, the less you like it. Of course, we as chefs want you to experience the food, and to the point where you go, wow, I wish I had one more bite. I think that is true success with any dish. Is kind of, I wish I had one more bite of that, because you're still wanting for something. Tasting menus, as Corey says, gives us an opportunity to really highlight what's available that day. Really the best ingredients of that moment, and put it together in a composition that we feel adds a sense of quality and flavor to it. That's going to give you an experience again that you're going to remember, because it's all about those memories. Success is about memories. Having people in our restaurants that don't like our restaurants, I think, or we don't want to have come into our restaurant, it's an odd question. I think that the tasting menu for me, as it developed, because we used to have also a smaller tasting menu where there were choices in each category as we started the restaurant. But what happened was people would be full of anxiety, about that. Like, what do I choose? I'm here once. It's this very, very well-known restaurant. I don't want to make a mistake. What should I choose? And so trying to relieve the guest of that kind of anxiety on what to choose, whether it's about the food or whether it's about the wine. If we can relieve all that anxiety and all those questions that they have, and just give them a great experience, then we're more likely to be successful than letting them choose something and they go, well, that was really what I wanted. Or that's not what I've heard about. I've heard about these other things. So giving them the experience that we want to give them, and this is really echoing what Corey said.
Are there no choices within the tasting menu?
There are always choices. You talked about great restaurants. I mean, there's always choices at great restaurants, right?
Within a tasting menu.
We have a list of dishes that aren't on the tasting menu that are available. If you don't like quail, we may have pigeon, we may have chicken, we may have.
How do they know that?
The conversation with the captain. So this is where our guests and our team really has to set people at ease. And I think you think about a restaurant, and I realize, and Corey feels the same way, is food is like maybe third, fourth, or fifth in importance, right? It's the first. What's really important is, as I said, the people that you come with, and making sure that you're with a group that you like. Your friends, your family, your loved ones. I mean, that is really, I think, a basic formula for success in any restaurant is having you come and be happy with who you are with. And then, of course, the service staff and how they greet you and how they interact with you. So, yes, if you're at ease and you say this to the captain, I really don't like quail, the captain can say, that's no problem. We've got these things. Can I have more vegetables? No problem. Yeah, we have that. So I think what we do as great restaurants and great chefs is try to give people what they want within reason. We write our menus based on what we feel, but we always, and Corey's the same way, we always have options.
Do you always have options?
We have several menus happening simultaneously each day. And because of that, we have options. And we're very accommodating when it comes to dietary restrictions, and a lot of our work goes into those dishes that are actually off the menu, so to speak. And that's part of being a good restaurant.
But you said in your book about, I believe it's pronounced padan, or 100-year-old eggs, that you start off the meal with a quail egg, not a duck egg, with a green yolk. And some people cannot eat the green yolk. And you feel they came to the wrong restaurant.
Or they didn't like Dr. Zeus, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Or they thought they were going to be poisoned.
Yeah, well, I think that we try to, we work tirelessly with a huge team, and we try to offer something that's unique to our restaurant, where you can come and have dishes or an experience that you can only have at our restaurant in San Francisco. And some of that is very cerebral or intellectual, and that's in an effort to create some kind of emotional connection with the person. But if someone comes in, they need to have somewhat of an open mind. and they have to be interested in trying new things. And if they're not interested, that connection is very hard to make.
Has there ever been anyone who didn't eat a green yolk who ate the rest of the meal and was very happy?
There have been a few, yeah.
Did I get the green yolk?
You've had it a few times.
And not for St. Patrick's Day, and not green eggs and ham.
Yeah.
It's a perfect introduction
but
to green eggs and ham.
Yeah, that's, you gotta love Dr. Zeus, right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
But the thing about that preparation and why I think it's a good indication of whether they'll enjoy the meal or not is because if you were to eat that blind, it'd be something you'd recognize. It's very savory, it has a cheesy quality. You have it with a rich soup made from cabbage and onions and puree with a little bit of dairy. So it's a very familiar texture and flavor. But when you see it, you're psychologically, you have a hard time accepting it. So that really puts a diner to the test. Are you open-minded?
Puts a diner to the test.
Absolutely. I mean, are you open-minded about what you're going to have, or are you rejecting it because it's different and it's foreign?
But you don't throw them out if they didn't eat the green egg.
No, I've never done that.
Something else you said that would perhaps relate to both of you, that Benu is a restaurant of San Francisco, and that it would not be the same anyplace else. You mean to say if you moved Benu to New York, it would have no meaning with the same menu?
I don't know if it'd have no meaning, but we're a young restaurant. We've been open for 5 years, and it's evolved, I think, enormously in that short period of time. And part of that evolution has been informed by where we are and the city that we're in. And San Francisco has been a huge influence on how the cuisine has developed. So if we were to transplant that to New York, would it be the same restaurant? I don't know. But if we had opened from the beginning in New York, I don't think we'd be the same restaurant we are today.
Do you find, Thomas, the same reactions or perception of your food between French Laundry and Per Se, which has many of the same dishes? I don't know if the menus are identical. I've never studied that closely, but a number of the signature dishes are there. Does it have different meaning in New York than in the French Laundry?
Well, I don't think it's about location. I think it's about the guest. And I think when we think about great restaurants, I think we're all sharing around the world. We're all sharing the same guest. It may not be the exact same guest, but the same mentality, the same interests, the same love for great food, great wine, and great service. So when we opened in New York, people would ask me, "What are you going to change? Why?" Well, they're New Yorkers. Well, but this is not about New Yorkers. This is about a restaurant and a restaurant philosophy and a restaurant culture that revolves around my team, myself and my team's points of view. What we feel is maybe the best composition, the best food, the best service, the best environment, all those different things that are interactive with the guest. So it's not a New York restaurant as much as French Laundry is not a California restaurant.
Oh, so it's not, let's say, venue connected as Corey thinks Benu is in San Francisco.
I don't believe so. I think it's fine. Just to tell a little story about Corey, because I was with him for a long time, and in listening and trying to advise him or give him feedback on his restaurant. It's something that we do, and we talked about it for 3 or 4 years, maybe 2.5, 3 years, something about you opening a restaurant. And you can walk into anybody's kitchen, Corey's included, and say, who wants to open their own restaurant? And I guarantee you 90% of those young chefs' hands are going to go up. So you know that from the beginning, and I think if you can help those who have talent, commitment, dedication, focus to achieve that, I think that's a really great thing. And certainly Corey was one of those individuals. But he was always a New Yorker. I mean, he came to French Laundry for the sole purpose of coming back to New York to open Per Se. That was the only reason he came out there. He called me one day and he said, "This is what I want to do." When I was looking for the next chef for the French Laundry, Corey was the executive sous chef at Per Se, and I went to Jonathan Benu first because, with respect to the chef there, I wanted to see if it was okay if I offered Corey the chef's position at the French Laundry. And Jonathan said, "No, you can offer to him, chef, but he's not going to go. He's a New Yorker." Well, it's the chef position at the French Laundry, so he jumped at the chance. He came back to the French Laundry, and I'm trying to make this as short as possible. And as we worked together, and he started to develop his idea for his own restaurant, he was looking, in New York as his first choice to come back to. And I remember the restaurant downtown on Houston Street. Was it Houston or Green Street? I can't remember.
Oh, yeah, Homeron.
Homeron. Yeah. Well, both of us been there many times, and he was looking at that space. And we were on the golf course one day, and I think it was on the golf course, was it in San Francisco? When you said to me, Chef, I think I'm going to stay in San Francisco. And I asked him why. He said, because, the vegetables are so much better here than in New York. Is that about the story?
Yeah, that's mostly accurate.
Yeah. So for a chef, I think, it's really about this. It was about the ingredients and being able to have access to those ingredients.
But if I can just go back to Mimi's original question, I think that having worked there at the French Laundry for many years, I somewhat disagree in that I think the French Laundry has been influenced so much by the Napa Valley. I mean, think about the purveyors that just came in the back door. All those people made that restaurant what it is, or were part of making that restaurant what it is. And that happened in the Napa Valley. And if Chef opened French Laundry in, I don't know, Santa Cruz, Georgia, wherever.
Or New York.
Or New York. It would have evolved into a different restaurant.
You think so?
Yeah, I think that's correct. I think that, you are a product of your environment. I mean, but we're also, I think we're a product of, the French Laundry is a product of Napa Valley's success as well. We're in a community in Napa Valley where two things happen. One, people come, our visitors come to eat and drink. That's why they come to Napa. They don't, they may take a bike ride or go on a balloon ride, but primarily they're coming there to experience, the wine and the food, or the food and the wine. Other communities, San Francisco included, New York, and they're coming to experience other things, many, many things. There's many different opportunities to do different things. So that's one thing that's true about Napa Valley, and so we have an enormous agricultural environment around us, which offers us great opportunities to have some amazing products. The other thing is that people come there. People who come to Napa Valley to work are truly in the hospitality profession. Whether they're in the wine world, or whether in the hotel world, or whether in the restaurant world, they're all about hospitality. So I think our staff in Napa Valley is a little bit different than in other places.
Well, certainly the feeling is different. Having eaten in both coasts, I'm not sure if I were blindfolded I could tell the difference in the food, but I can tell the difference in my own feeling in being in the Napa Valley and being in Columbus Circle. So I think you come to it with a slightly different, more relaxed, I mean, Napa Valley, scent of eucalyptus, wineries. So
people are on vacation.
Yeah,
people are on vacation. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole different thing. People who go to Napa Valley are typically there, as visitors on vacation. People are, in New York, although we do have a lot of visitors, we do have a lot of professionals that work in New York.
Is there a big difference in the customer behavior? That I'd like to read about sometime. New Yorkers more impatient to get through a tasting menu?
I think once you make, I think people know per se, in the same way they know French Laundry or Benu, and I think they're willing to make the commitment. So I think they're fine with it.
You think they make the commitment?
Yeah. That's like going to a play. It's an evening out. I mean, that's what you're doing. You're not going to go to have dinner per se and then catch a Broadway show. That's not going to happen. It's either one or the other.
You might get a midnight performance of some weird movie down at IFC, but that would be. We have some questions from the audience.
I have a lot of questions.
For either one. What's your thought on cooking urban food, not something with collard greens, water spinach on mac and cheese, but something truly urban? Most urban foods are highly seasoned. What are your thoughts?
Corey, you want to field that one?
Urban seasoning.
Urban seasoning.
Dust.
I have no idea what that means, but.
A lot of dust.
No, I don't think there's a difference in how we approach cooking because it's in an urban environment. I think that might affect our program or the environment that the food is served in, but not the actual seasoning or the actual cooking. I mean, you have two restaurants in two very.
Yeah, again, I think we approach them the same. I mean, our philosophy, is the same in both of our restaurants.
If you could cook one endangered species, which one would you cook?
You started that. So that's a question for you.
I think we
Because
need a
you
restaurant
cook as well.
called
So
Endangered Species, and it would serve only endangered species.
what was that movie? I forget. Yeah. What was it? The
Probably yellowfin tuna, I would say right off the bat.
Okay.
Any endangered sharks' fins? Anything you love that you can't serve?
No.
No. This is again for both of you. A great presentation of American food. And for each of you, at what point in your careers did you realize that maybe if you kept doing what you're doing, you had the chance to be great? I mean, was there a point where you say, I now have to take off in a different direction to realize what I want to realize, which I think is another way of
Well,
phrasing.
define great. I mean, is great being recognized, or is great being satisfied with what
Rich.
you're doing? Stephen Ells is rich because he started Chipotle. I'm not sure, restaurateurs at our level are rich. So,
Yeah, I mean, if it's wealth, I'm still waiting for that moment.
Right.
But if it's a moment when I think I found some profession that would satisfy me, physically and artistically and creatively, it happened kind of right away. And then I think soon after, with some training, I realized this is something that I'm capable of doing well.
Did you always have a passion for flavor and eating, both of you? Were you both always interested in food? No. You were. You said
Yeah,
you
well, I was interested in food, and I think I recognized food as a very important thing because I was in a family that had come here from Korea. And if you were in a family that immigrated somewhere, trying to keep the same eating culture of your native country is a very big thing.
hold on to something.
Yeah. So I think I recognized the importance of food and what it signified, but professionally, that happened later.
Why didn't you? Did you grow up on Army bases?
for a while, but I grew up as the youngest of 5 brothers who, as a single parent, my mother raised us, and so it was my oldest brother's responsibility to cook for us, because she worked at night. She ran restaurants, and so what we ate was whatever they would cook, which was, as you can imagine, teenage boys cooking for their younger brothers. There wasn't a whole lot of food in the first place because whatever they cooked, they would eat most of. Swanson's TV dinners were a big thing for me because it was my own dinner.
If you're in New York City for one night, where would you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner? Let's make it dinner. What one restaurant would you want to go to if you were here for only one night?
Oh, per se, for sure.
You'd never get a reservation.
He would just walk in and they all bow down. Corey's here.
Well, I know if I could choose, it would definitely be in my sister's home. So it's just so rare that I think chefs get a home-cooked meal. Well, from my experience anyway.
Yeah, I need a chef. So if anybody want to invite us to dinner, it's a good opportunity.
How do you rate the importance for a 5-star experience? I don't know who gives 5 stars, but maybe somebody. Food, service, ambiance, proportions related to the rating of a restaurant.
Well, I think that we all recognize that you'll go back to a restaurant that has good food but great service before you go back to a restaurant that has great food and only good service. I think service really...
You'll go back for great food and...
No, you'll go back for good food and great service before you go back for great food.
And bad service.
Yeah, bad service.
Well, I don't want to say bad service, but mediocre service, yeah, or bad service. I think the service really... I think service really makes... Service really makes an experience for a guest.
That's too complicated. Which style of Korean barbecue do you prefer when eating out, bulgogi or kalbi?
Well,
Or you don't eat Korean food
No,
when you go out?
I eat a lot of Korean food, and I could give you the short answer or the long answer, but I'll go the short route.
This comes from a chef.
Yeah, so I eat kalbi, which is basically the short rib, but that's just one of many different kinds of barbecue. And bulgogi is actually probably my least favorite. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite Korean restaurant in New York?
Oh, that's really tough. I have some friends out there, so.
Give us a couple.
No, there's a lot. There's Hangawi. Yesterday I ate a new restaurant that opened on 32nd Street, Baekjeong. So that opened about, I think, 6 months ago. It was my first time there, but they have an outpost in LA and in Korea, and that was really good.
What's the name?
Baekjeong.
32nd and what?
It's 32nd and 5th.
Okay.
You want to write that down, maybe?
Yeah, I don't have to write it down.
You got it.
No, I don't like that. Oh, this is a good one, because I think I know the answer. What do you think the next big food trend in the U.S. is going to be? I would make it the next big influence.
I don't like trends.
You don't like what?
Yeah, I don't like trends. I think trends are defined as something that has a beginning and an ending, and I don't want to be part of a trend that has.
Well, it may go into fusion.
I think we want to have. I think we want to have movements. You know, movements are much more.
All right, movement.
Yeah.
Let's say influence.
What's the next big movement in food?
Yeah. Let's say the next big influence on our cuisine.
In America.
Yes.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I think that we want to continue to work with our farmers, our foragers, our fishermen, our gardeners, and support them.
But that's not a style.
No, but we think about, okay, so chefs became a movement in the world, right? Chefs started gaining recognition. Sommeliers started gaining recognition. And I think that those people who actually bring us our food, who raise our food, who grow our food, who forage for our food, who catch our food, are every bit as important, and sometimes more so than anybody else in the process. So I'd like to see a little more respect, a little more recognition, a little more of our support for what they're doing, and not always looking for the best at the cheapest.
Well, I'll tell you the next influence is going to be West African. You heard it here. Because the ingredients, the style of the food that I've been having at West African restaurants in Harlem has such resonance that I think it's going to be very much in the mix the way Middle East was a few years back and still continuing. There's a certain familiarity with the look of Louisiana cooking, which makes it not too strange to people, which is not too hard to understand since most of the slaves who did the cooking in Louisiana came from West Africa. So I think we're going to hear a lot about their spices and their ingredients.
Do you think we'll ever get tired of looking for the next new thing?
No, I hope not. That would be very boring. Nobody would have eaten nouvelle cuisine.
Yeah.
I mean, what's new, what's ahead, isn't that America?
I think that's an attitude that we all have, but sometimes we forget about what we have today for quest for something.
Well, I think it should never be at the expense of the old and the plastic.
But that in many cases happens.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the part that I
That's because you get all the press.
Sorry?
That's because the new restaurants get the press and they don't go back and review the old.
Well, I'm not talking about restaurants. I'm just talking about what we do in anything, right? Not just chefs, but in every part of our life.
Explain the decision to include gratuity in the price of your menu. What are the positives and the negatives?
I think that's a question for chefs.
You include gratuity?
Well, yeah. I think New York and California are very two different places, and that's why I say it's a question for chef. Yeah. We do that in California because there are certain things unique and specific to California. But I think chefs doing it for different.
We did it just solely because it allows, many different reasons, but it allows us to take back the ownership of our employees. Somebody who's working for gratuity is actually a bit of a subcontractor in that environment as they're working for you, the guests. And if they feel that you're going to give them a big tip or the opportunity for a big tip, you're going to spend a little more time focusing on you than the person next to you. If you're a friend of theirs, they're certainly going to spend more time with you. It also affords us to really to have a balance between our different departments, whether it's the kitchen, whether it's the wine, whether it's the dining room, or whether it's even the administrative department, because that revenue it's actually not gratuity. So just to clarify that, it's a service charge. It's service compris. So it's services included in the price, which means that's revenue for the restaurant, which means obviously we pay taxes on it as well, but it affords us the opportunity to spread it around where we want to. It gives us the opportunity to offer, better benefits for the dining room staff. It gives us opportunities to offer better vacation time for the dining room staff. So it really balances out everybody to have them on the same playing field, if you will.
Do you include it?
We're included at Benu, and we just started that this year, actually.
Mm-hmm. Do they leave extra tips?
Some people do, and that's when it's gratuity, which is, again, different from service charge or service compris.
This is a question for Thomas Keller. When you are home, what is a typical dinner at your house, and who cooks it?
I don't cook at home. If we do, it's just something on the grill in the summertime. A steak with some vegetables, salad, very simple.
I like this one. What is the last fast food restaurant you ate in? You brought coffee from Dunkin' Donuts, so we know about
I didn't bring,
you.
No, I did not bring that. Somebody
Where'd you
brought
get
it for me. The last fast food restaurant I've eaten at would probably be In-N-Out Burger. I think most people know I'm a fan of In-N-Out Burger. So.
Corey?
Oh, he took my answer.
Because it's good. It's In-N-Out.
Well, I think Chipotle is the one to watch in the next presidential election because both Hillary and Jeff admit to eating at Chipotle. So
Okay.
I think
well, there you go, Stephen L's again, right?
there's going to be an element of responsibility and intellect, of course. I think more intellectuals eat in Chipotle than none.
Okay.
So I'm now watching who eats where and what fast food restaurant it is. So I think that about does it.
Thank you.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
you all
of
for coming. I appreciate it. Thank you.